For 300 years, a series of 5 powerful dynasties ruled from Delhi, and in doing so, they completely changed the course of Indian history. Now, this wasn't some single stable empire. Oh no, it was more like a thrilling and often pretty brutal relay race for power. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of the rise and fall of the Delhi Sultanate.
So to really get how the Sultanate even began, you have to understand one absolutely crucial difference. You see, the early invaders like Mahmud of Ghazni, they were basically raiders. They came for the loot, they'd sack a city, and then they'd leave. But Muhammad Ghori, he was different. His goal wasn't just to raid, it was to rule. And that simple shift in ambition, from raiding to ruling, well, that's the spark that ignites our whole story.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to see how invaders first kicked open the door to India. Then we'll look at how the first sultans actually forged an empire out of all that conquest. We will see it hit its absolute peak, followed by the, well, bizarre reign of a ruler known as the wisest fool. And finally, we'll track that long, slow decline to its dramatic end. Okay, first up, the Forerunners. This whole period saw the opening of what historians at the time called the Bab al-Islam, which literally means the gateway of Islam into India. But, this wasn't a gateway opened by peaceful merchants. It was forced open by the sword.
Just look at how quickly things heat up. In 1191, Muhammad Ghori is defeated. He retreats, but he is relentless. He comes back just 1 year later, wins a huge victory, and sets up a permanent base. Then, in 1206, Ghori is assassinated. And in that moment of pure chaos, his most trusted general, a former slave named Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, does something incredible. He seizes control and declares the founding of a brand new empire, the Delhi Sultanate.
So, this new Mamluk, or slave dynasty, now had a huge challenge. They had to take Ghori's conquests and somehow turn them into a real, functioning empire. This is where the hard work of empire building really starts. You have to remember, the Sultanate was never just one family passing down the throne. It was a series of 5 totally distinct dynasties. The Mamluks and the Tughlaqs, they ruled for almost a century each, but I want you to pay attention to that short little 30-year bar for the Khaljis. As we're about to see, their brief reign was one of the most explosive and impactful in the Sultanate's entire history. So, Aibak laid the first stone. Literally, he started building the famous Qutb Minar. He was known for being super generous, right up until his, well, very strange death falling off a horse during a polo match. But the true architect of the empire was his successor, Iltutmish. He's the one who made Delhi the permanent capital, and most importantly, he managed to save this baby empire from the terrifying threat of Genghis Khan's Mongol hordes sweeping across Asia. Now, to manage this new empire, Iltutmish came up with some brilliant tools. The most important was the Iqta system, a clever way to pay his generals. Instead of cash, he'd give them the right to collect taxes from a piece of land. To secure his own power, he also created the Chalisa, a powerful council of 40 supposedly loyal nobles. It was a move that would have very dangerous consequences down the line. This quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the problem faced by Iltutmish's chosen successor, his own daughter, the brilliant Razia Sultan. Iltutmish knew she was the most capable of all his children, but that powerful Chalisa he created, they just couldn't accept a woman as their ruler. And they eventually conspired to have her overthrown and killed. After years of chaos, the next major sultan, Balban, took power. And here's the kicker. Balban himself had been a member of the Chalisa. He knew exactly how they operated, how dangerous they were from the inside. His solution was simple and absolutely brutal, a policy of blood and iron. He systematically crushed their power to make one thing crystal clear. The authority of the sultan was absolute. Okay, so the Mamluks built the foundations and brought back order. But it was the next dynasty, the Khaljis, who were going to take the Sultanate to its absolute peak of power and territory. The man behind it all was Alauddin Khalji. The guy was ambitious, a visionary, and completely ruthless. He didn't just see himself as a king, he saw himself as a world conqueror, even giving himself the title Sikandar-e-Sani, or the Second Alexander. Every single one of Aladdin's radical reforms had one main goal: to grab as much power as possible and to fund a massive loyal army. By fixing prices in the market, he could afford to pay his soldiers in cash. Now this was revolutionary. It meant their loyalty was to him and his treasury, not to some local lord on a piece of land. And this huge, well-funded army was his ultimate weapon. It smashed multiple Mongol invasions and pushed the Sultanate's borders deep into southern India for the first time ever.
But you know what they say, what goes up must come down. After the Khalji peak, the next dynasty, the Tughlaqs, inherited an empire at its most powerful. And their reign would become a perfect example of brilliant ideas leading to total, catastrophic failure.
And right at the center of all this was Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq. The man was a certified genius, incredibly smart, full of grand ideas, but his complete inability to actually make them work earned him one of the most unique nicknames in all of history, the wisest fool. His reign was just one grand experiment after another, and each one was an absolute disaster. He forced the entire population of Delhi to move hundreds of miles south, only to make them all move back again. He introduced a new token currency, which led to so much counterfeiting that the economy basically collapsed. He spent a fortune building an army to invade Persia, and then just called it off. Every failure was somehow bigger than the last.
This famous line from the historian Badayuni just perfectly sums up his entire reign. By the end, there was a complete breakdown of trust. It was like both the Sultan and his subjects were just relieved it was all over. Muhammad bin Tughlaq's disastrous experiments left the empire broken and weak, and a devastating blow from the outside was about to speed up its complete collapse.
In 1398, the conqueror Timur, sometimes known as Tamerlane, came crashing down into India. He completely sacked the city of Delhi. It was a massacre so brutal that the Sultanate's power and its reputation never, ever recovered.
What came next were the last two much weaker dynasties. The Sayyids were basically rulers in name only. They were followed by the Lodis, who are important because they were the first Afghan rulers after a long line of Turkic sultans. This big shift in who held power created all new tensions and rebellions, weakening the empire even more and setting the stage for a new player to enter the game.
And here we are, the final act. A weakened, divided sultan now faces a new challenger from the north. A challenger armed with a revolutionary new military technology that would change warfare in India forever.
The year is 1526. The place is a field in Panipat, not far from Delhi. This is the endgame.
The challenger, Babur, a descendant of both Timur and Genghis Khan, brings something new to the battlefield: cannons and gunpowder. His smaller, more disciplined army absolutely crushes the huge force of the final sultan, Ibrahim Lodi, who dies right there on the field. In a single day, the Delhi Sultanate is wiped out.
And just like that, after 300 years, the Sultanate was gone. But its legacy? That was a different story. It had created the very idea of a centralized Indo-Islamic state ruled from Delhi. The systems of administration, the unique blend of art and culture, the incredible architecture, none of that disappeared. It became the foundation that the new conqueror, Babur, and his Mughal descendants would